Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here together with you, all of you. And I would like first to thank a lot IFOAM Europe for having invited me to this conference, and also, of course, Interbio, Nouvelle-Aquitaine. En fait, je vais faire ma présentation en anglais étant donné l'audience internationale du congrès. Yeah, I am not the president of the IFOAM Europe. So I'm dealing with research on human nutrition and relation with health for decades and decades, and all my career was made at the INSERM, the National Institute for Health and Medical Research in France, and I'm still a member of a Cardiovascular and Nutrition Research Center in the Faculty of Medicine in Marseille. As a citizen, I am also a member of the coordination of the Organic Food System program. It is an international network, and also a member of the UN Sustainable Food System program. So I will deal with you today on the health benefit of organic food consumption, the end stage of the organic food system. Just to start, to give you the frame of what we are discussing today. Reminding you the definition of sustainable diet. It has been raised in 2010 at the headquarters of the FAO in Roma. I took part of this definition, and I was very happy we were able, by consensus, to raise it. It says that sustainable diets are those diets with low environmental impact, which contribute to food and nutrition security and to healthy life for present and future generations. Sustainable diets are protective and respectful of biodiversity and ecosystems, culturally acceptable, accessible, economically fair and affordable, nutritionally adequate, safe and healthy, while optimizing natural and human resources. You can see that's a big program. It is now the reference for the UN system in terms when you are talking about sustainable diet. As you can see, you can identify a lot of keywords which are basically in the definition of organic farming and organic consumption. So based on this definition, it is clear that we need to move toward sustainable diet and sustainable food system. It is a very urgent need due to the food insecurity problem worldwide, nutrition-related diseases, and ecological changes and damage. So that means we need three things. First, sustainable food production system. The best one is organic production. We need high food quality and safety. Organic production seems to reach this goal. And also we need sustainable food pattern, dietary patterns for consumers. If we consider these three blocks of needs, we could expect to achieve some goals for humankind and together planetary health. That's a concept, the new concept of the UN system called One Health. So looking at organic food consumers, regarding food quality, we have a lot of scientific data, several hundred of comparative studies comparing the content in nutrients of organic food compared to conventional foods. And based on meta-analysis published since 2010, it is clear that there is some advantages in organic foods. In animal foods, it is a presence of more beneficial polyunsaturated fatty acid. In plant foods, more antioxidants of various families, and also for safety, due to the much less important chemical contamination by chemical pesticide residues and nitrate. If we look at at consumers of organic foods. Up to now, we had only very small scale studies describing the profile of organic consumers. We have very little information about actual food and nutrient intakes and diet-related health indicators. So to fill this gap in terms of public health and also sustainability, with my colleagues in Paris, we aim to use a very large NutriNet Santé cohort study to provide large-scale relevant scientific evidence. So to the end, we used the French NutriNet Santé cohort study. It has been launched by my colleagues in Paris. They are experts in epidemiology and nutrition. This group is led by Serge Herberg. The two aims of this big study is to investigate the relationship between nutrition, lifestyle, and health outcomes in a large adult cohort, and also to study the role of various determinants of dietary behaviors and nutritional status and their interactions. So this large perspective, it is a prospective cohort study. That means people engaged in the cohort are followed for a decade at least. It started in 2009. To date, in the database, we have 170,000 adults. It is one of the most important cohorts in the world in the general population. Of course, everything is done through a web-based questionnaire and a dedicated secured interface. We have the address of the web address of the study. We are also able to collect in 20,000 people sample of urine and blood in order to be able to make some analysis necessary for some projects. Of course, we are registering everything occurring during the follow-up, and especially we are registering in the database all the important health outcomes, and these health outcomes are validated by a medical committee. Of course, we have set a huge database, and in addition to the data specifically collected on the cohort, we are crossing our database with other databases related to processing of food, to impact on the environment, to pesticide residues, and also economical data like the purchase cost of food. I will focus today on the health aspect. So just an example on when you are connected to the web interface, you can fill questionnaire about food you eat, drinks you drink during days, with extremely detailed data. For example, for each food you indicate, you have the option between 7 different sizes of the portion. Just an example, we have questionnaire about physical activity and sedentary behavior, about socioeconomics of the individual and the family, and lifestyle. We have registration of anthropometric data, self-perception, behavior, and a very big questionnaire about health. So everything is done every year at least. So within this very large project, we raised the BioNutrinet project with important financial support from the Ministry of Research. So the specific aim of this project was to describe organic food consumers, investigate the relationship with dietary pattern, food pesticide exposure, health outcome, some economical aspects, and also impact on resources and climate. Of course, my colleagues, which are experts in epidemiology, are using the state-of-the-art epidemiological tools to deal with the huge data and treatment, modelings also. And we were able to publish more than 20 scientific papers since our first one. So the study started in 2009 with a first questionnaire where people were asked to say if they eat never, occasionally, or very frequently organic foods from 16 groups. Based on this data and the general data of the cohort, we are able to publish a first scientific publication in 2013. Then, based on this first observational data, we are able to raise a very big multidisciplinary project. It was funded by the Ministry of Research. This made us able to raise a second questionnaire with much more details on 264 food items with 5 different levels of organic consumption from 0 up to almost. And so as listed at right, we published in the most important nutrition journals and also health journal and also general journals in epidemiology and even Nature. So this BioNutrinet project is coordinated by my colleague Emmanuel Casguillot from the group in Paris, and all the data have been treated by the consortium. So just regarding lifestyle, a short summary of what we found regarding regular organic consumers compared to no consumer of organic food. In general, they are women. These people have very low income. They less report a restrictive diet to lose weight. They generally have a higher education level. They are no smoking people, and they have a higher level of physical activity. From the standards we know, that's a healthier lifestyle profile. Regarding diets, that's an example of the last study we performed. We divided the cohort of almost 30,000 people in 5 groups, from Q1 with no consumption of organic food up to Q5 with the most regular consumption of organic food. Approximately 70% of foods was organic in Q5. As you can see, the type of food consumed is very different. If you go from Q1 to Q5, on the left you have the animal foods, and you can see that there is a marked decrease in the consumption of meat, of processed meat, to a lesser degree to poultry meat, but no change for seafood and also eggs. It is not mentioned here. But if you look at right, regarding all of the plant foods, there is a marked increase in the consumption of plant foods. It is the case for vegetables, including foods, for fruits, including fruit juice, for nuts, and for legumes. So from the different approaches we are devoted to the diet of organic food consumer, it is absolutely clear that the intake of all foods of plant origin increase when increasing the contribution of organic foods in the diet. And a reverse trend was observed for basically all animal foods except eggs and seafoods. This includes also a decrease in cookies, in fast food, and soda. We are also able to calculate 2 dietary scores, and in the 2 cases, the score of quality increased when increasing the proportion of organic foods in the diet. One score was devoted to the adherence to the official French recommendation, and the second score was related to the adherence to the recommended intake for a variety of nutrients and fiber. Based on the database we have about the content, the nutritional content of 3,000 foods in France, we are able to calculate it based on the food consumptions of the subject, they intake in nutrients. And the good news is that we found for regular consumers of organic foods that for important nutrients, they have a significant increase in intake, in daily intake of this nutrient. It is the case for polyunsaturated fatty acid, and especially the N-3 fatty acid. For a lot of vitamins, vitamin C, E, B9, beta-carotene, for some minerals, magnesium and iron, and a very important increase in dietary fibers. because they are using less refined products. So the conclusion was that organic consumers have a better, healthier diet. Of course, look also at the contamination of the subject eating or not organic foods. To that purpose, from the thousand people in the cohort, we selected 150 organic consumers with a high level of organic consumption, close to 70% of organic foods. We match people by people, these organic consumers, with 150 non-organic consumers. It was about 3% organic food in their diet. They were matched on all characteristics we have in the database, including the type of food consumed. This was to be able to evaluate the direct impact of organic versus no organic on contamination. Thanks to the sample of urines collected, we are able to analyze the residues of pesticides of two very important families, the organophosphorus and the pyrethroid family. In the two occasions, you can see that there is a significant difference, between the two groups. In red, conventional, in green, organic consumers. On the left, organic phosphorus metabolite, and on the right, pyrethroid metabolites. So clearly, the conclusion of this work is that an organic-based diet reduces exposure to organophosphorus and pyrethroid metabolism. This is logical because we know that the content of this pesticide in the organic food is much lower, but it is important to demonstrate that the consequence is this one. In fact, this finding is not alone. We have already 7 studies of this type published in the world showing that people having a regular diet based on organic foods have a significant reduction, sometimes by 90%, in the residue of pesticide in urine. So, of course, after this preliminary data, we aim to look at the relationship between an organic consumption and the occurrence of diseases. Of course, we started with overweight and obesity because it is the first step of the pandemic. There is not only the COVID pandemic. Worldwide, according to the WHO, there is a worldwide pandemic in overweight and obesity. So we performed the first observational cross-sectional study. At a given time point, we compared regular organic consumers with no organic consumers. We are able to work on 54,000 subjects, 77% of women, with a mean age of 46 years. Just to provide you with a key result, we demonstrated that a high consumption of organic foods is significantly associated with a marked reduction from -36 to -62% in the risk of getting overweight or obesity, both in male and female. Of course, to get this data, we have adjusted all the data with all the confounders, the other variables that could affect the development, of course, of overweight, of obesity, like physical activity, type of food consumed, and so on and so on and so on. The good news also is that this study has been replicated in 2 countries. One in Germany, published in 2015, and one in the USA, published in 2020. So there have been only 3 studies dedicated to this topic, and the 3 studies indicate a significant reduction. In fact, we would like to do better. So the next step was to make a prospective study. That means a follow-up of the people during time to look at the occurrence of overweight and obesity. We are able to work on 62,000 people, and we made a 3-year follow-up. That's a rather short follow-up for developing such a problem like overweight or obesity, but we are happily surprised to see that even with after a short time of follow-up, it was possible to show significant difference in the occurrence. So we made 4 groups from these 62,000 subjects, from basically no consumption of organic food up to Q4, with about 70% organic food in the diet. In gray, in the column in gray, it is no organic food consumers. In green, at right, that's most important, organic food consumption. You can see a stepwise decrease of the occurrence of overweight and obesity after 3 years when increasing the consumption of organic foods. If you compare the two extremes, there was a significant reduction by 23% in the risk of overweight and 31% in the risk of getting obese. Of course, this was obtained after adjusting for all confounders. So, in terms of interpretation of the data, it is clear that we observe there that increasing the consumption of organic foods after adjustment is strongly shows positive effects on the risk of developing overweight and obesity. So after this observation, we moved to the next step in terms of pathology. The next step is the risk of cardiovascular disease. Because we know that when you get obesity, central obesity especially, we have a big chance to get hypertension, to get a disturbance in the metabolism of glucose and lipid metabolism, which is the first step of the increasing risk for cardiovascular disease. So to do that, we need to look at the metabolic syndrome. It is a combination of all these aspects, and it is a case for 20% of the French population. So we made 3 groups: no organic food consumption, occasional consumption, or regular organic consumption. And comparing the two extremes, there was a significant difference by 31% in the reduction of the risk to get a metabolic syndrome. So that means that in terms of public health, it's a reduction from 20% of the population to 12% of the population. It is a major public health impact. So the next step, if nothing is done, is type 2 diabetes. In France, by now, there is more than 5% of the adult population with a type 2 diabetes. It is also, according to the WHO, a worldwide epidemic of type 2 diabetes. So we are able to work with more than 30,000 people with a mean age of 53 years. And we had a follow-up of 4 years for that, and we identified almost 300 new incident cases of type 2 diabetes. We made 5 groups to compare no organic consumption, Q1, up to Q5 with most organic food consumption. You have the figure of the data, the main data at right. And from the second group of second level of consumption of organic food up to the most important, we got a significant reduction in the risk of getting a type 2 diabetes in 4 years. When comparing the two extreme groups, we found a reduction by 35% of the risk of getting a type 2 diabetes after 4 years. Also, our colleague in the United States, based on the NAINS cohort, which is a reference cohort in the United States for this kind of study, they showed also that adults in the USA consuming the most organic foods have a reduced risk to get a type 2 diabetes by minus 20%, and the most consumer of organic food got a reduction by 24%. So finally, we look at cancers. Of course, it was necessary to look at very, very increasing and important pathology. As we have different type of cancer, it is a much complex approach than for the rest. So we work on 8 different cancer types. We started working with 70,000 people with a mean age of 44 years, which is rather young, and the follow-up was for 4.6 years. We made 4 groups based on organic food consumption from the left, no organic food consumption, up to the right, Q4, with about between 60 and 70% of organic foods. Of course, we adjusted all the data with all confounders that could play a role in getting a cancer. As you can see, when increasing the organic food consumption, there is a decrease in the risk, which became significant with the most important organic food consumption, with a significant reduction by 25% of the risk of getting a cancer. We could calculate that each increment of 15% in the proportion of organic food in the diet was associated with a reduced risk of getting a cancer by 8%. The study has been published in the JAMA, which is one of the 3 most important worldwide medical journals. Looking at the specific site for cancer, we identified very significant difference for 3 types of cancer. It was almost significant for breast cancer in women in general, but we found a marked significant reduction for the postmenopausal breast cancer by 34%. And for lymphomas, total lymphomas or non-Hodgkin lymphomas, we got an extremely marked difference with a reduction around 80% of the risk. For skin cancer, we're also very close to significance, but we need more data and more follow-up to identify a significant difference. So just to inform you that another study has been performed, but with less quality in collecting data, that showed in Great Britain a reduction by 20% of the risk of lymphoma in women having a diet containing some organic foods. So the 2 only studies performed in the world on that topic show significant reduction for lymphomas, which is a cancer of the lymphatic system. And it is a kind of cancer mostly associated with the use of pesticides. So it is not by chance, we can say. So of course, at the end of all our papers published, in the discussion, we raise the hypothesis. We raise the hypothesis that this big difference in occurrence of pathologies, including overweight and obesity, could be due to a much lower exposure to pesticides, because we know that the scientific literature regarding the known relationship between exposure to pesticide and health, and especially in farmers. So we have published recently, the last one was this year, to test directly this hypothesis. In the first study, based on the data we have observed in postmenopausal women, we are able to work on 13,000 postmenopausal women, which were followed for almost 5 years. And we question what's the occurrence of new breast cancer linked to exposure to pesticide. In a second study on 33 adults, followed also for about 6 years, we question about the occurrence of new type 2 diabetes linked to the exposure of pesticide. To be able to ask the question, we need to be able to calculate the exposure to pesticide brought by food. So we are unable to get the official data from France, but we are financed by the Ministry of Research in France. So after important search, we find a database available in Germany. It is a reference database for pesticide residue in foods at the European Union level. And unfortunately, this database contains a lot of data on conventional foods, but also on organic foods. So we crossed our database with the database of the of the Cuvas from Germany, and based on crossing this data, we are able to calculate food by food, individual by individual, the exposure to 25 pesticides. We selected these 25 pesticides because it was impossible to work with the whole database. Okay. And so using computers and algorithms, we are able to identify which mix of pesticides could be associated in increase or decrease due to the exposure to pesticide to these two pathologies. Just to give you the result published in the most important journals in the world, the people exposed the lowest to a mixture of pesticide was associated with a significant reduction of the risk of breast cancer and the risk of type 2 diabetes. In contrary, the people with the highest exposure to synthetic pesticide mixed was associated with a significant increase of risk of breast cancer and type 2 diabetes. It was the case especially for women. So I will skip data just to finish because I am under pressure. We're also crossing with another database on the environmental impact of food production. We're able to calculate the impact on greenhouse gas emission, energy use, and land use for producing the diet of this subject. We made 5 groups. In gray, no organic foods. In green, Q5, mostly organic food. And as you can see on the cartoon, increasing the consumption of organic foods lead to a marked reduction in greenhouse gas emission, energy use for producing, and land use for producing. So just to conclude, our study has shown that organic consumers have some specific traits. They have a healthy dietary pattern based on plant foods that best fit with our recommendations and nutrient intakes. They are markedly less overweight and obese, with a lower cardiovascular risk, type 2 diabetes and cancers. They ingest less pesticide-contaminated food. They have significantly less pesticide in urines, and they have less impact on natural resources and greenhouse gas emission. Thus, they show a better compliance with a sustainable diet concept raised by the FAO and the new UN One Health concept. Just to inform you that in France, the new recommendation recommend now for plant food, which are the most contaminated food by pesticide, to favor organic foods from plant origin. We calculated the impact and published in Nature this paper showing that if French adults adhere to the new French recommendation, you will indeed reduce, of course, animal foods. We will markedly increase plant foods. We will increase a lot the organic share of foods. You will promote health by reduction the rate of death at a national level. You will improve the protection of resources and environment, and that is obtained with a very small increase in the cost, in the daily cost of food, which is 0.9 euro per day per people. So just to remind that we are just not just thinking to our colleague Hippocrates 24 centuries ago. He discovered, before us, of course, clearly, that the diet is very important for conserving health. That the interaction between genetics and the type of food, natural or processed, is an important thing. But also that we need to make exercise. But there's a combination of exercise and a good diet. It could be good if you make a proper attention to the season of the year, the change of the wind, the age of the individual, and the situation of his home. So please don't forget that.